At 52, I thought I had it all. The corner office, the tailored suits, the seven-figure salary. At the annual corporate gala, I laughed too hard at a joke my boss made about working husbands and lonely wives. It was harmless, or so I thought, until I came home that night, and the world I'd spent my life building collapsed in silence. The house was dark. On the kitchen counter sat a half-empty glass of wine, my daughter's drawing of our family, with me missing, and a note. 12 lines. No anger, just clarity. You chose them every time, Thomas. So tonight, I choose us. Without you. I stood there, still in my tuxedo, staring at the empty hallway. My wife, Elaine, and our daughter, Chloe, were gone. Not on vacation. Gone. And the worst part? I couldn't remember the last time Chloe asked me to tuck her in, or the last time Elaine smiled at something I said. I had closed million-dollar deals, saved crumbling portfolios, mentored CEOs, but I had failed at the one job that truly mattered, being present for the people I loved. What followed was not a redemption arc with soft music and easy forgiveness. It was a war against ego, time, regret, and the ghosts of my own choices. But somewhere in that rubble, I found a reason to fight. If you've ever convinced yourself you're working for your family while missing out on your family, stay. You need to hear what happened next, before you lose what matters most. My name is Thomas Granger, and I'm 52 years old. 25 years ago, I promised Elaine I'd build her a life she never had to escape from. I said that on the steps of a crumbling courthouse after our tiny wedding, in a suit 2 sizes too big and a heart swollen with ambition. We had nothing. No savings, no family inheritance. Just dreams and a shared futon in a 1-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling. I was raised in a rusted trailer in Indiana, where broken beer bottles outnumbered books, and a good day meant Dad hadn't raised his voice. My mother vanished when I was 10. I never knew where she went. Maybe she ran. Maybe she gave up. Either way, I swore I'd never give anyone I loved a reason to run from me. So I worked, hard, ruthlessly. I clawed my way into the financial sector, spent my 20s surviving off instant ramen and spreadsheets, and by 35, I was the youngest VP at one of Chicago's most aggressive asset firms. We moved into a custom-built home with heated floors and a kitchen Elaine only half believed was ours. Chloe was born in the spring. I missed the birth. I was in New York closing a merger, but I made it for the photos. Elaine never complained. She was grace embodied, soft-spoken, endlessly patient, and always reminding me to take off my shoes before stepping on the carpet. She taught high school English and loved quoting Bronte at the breakfast table. Chloe had her eyes and my stubborn chin. She was obsessed with dinosaurs and once told her teacher she wanted to grow up to be a nice boss, not like Daddy's. At first, I thought I was doing it right. I came home late, but I came home with gifts. Music boxes from Tokyo, dolls from Dubai, signed books from New York, authors Elaine loved. I built an empire and decorated my absence with expensive tokens. The problem with golden cages is they still have bars. Birthdays came, recitals happened, soccer games kicked off, and I missed them. At first, it was the occasional conflict. I'll make it to the next one, I'd say. And Elaine would smile that tight smile that meant she believed me because she wanted to, not because she should. Chloe would pout, but a stuffed triceratops usually brought back a laugh. Then it became routine. I remember one Friday evening, Elaine lit a candle at the dinner table. Her quiet protest when I'd text I'd be late again. Chloe had drawn a family picture at school that day. She held it up proudly. It was a house with 3 stick figures. I asked which one was me. "You're the car outside," she said. Elaine touched my arm lightly. "She's just joking, Tom." But she wasn't. Still, I rationalized everything. "I'm doing this for them," I told myself, and others echoed it back. Co-workers called me provider, dedicated, the man who sacrifices for his family. That kind of praise can blind you. What I didn't know then was that Elaine had started keeping a journal, not of her thoughts, but of the moments I missed. 1 line per entry. March 2nd, Chloe asked where Daddy lives. April 15th, school play, empty seat, 3rd row. May 9th, I didn't cry this time. I didn't know because she didn't show anger. She showed quiet detachment. She didn't beg. She adapted. The dinners without me became their new normal. My absence was no longer an interruption. It was the routine. And I kept building. Every missed moment I justified. Every sacrifice I labeled noble. But behind that was a darker truth I didn't want to name. I wasn't building for them. I was building against my past. I wanted to prove that I wasn't my father, that poverty wouldn't win, that my success could drown the noise of a childhood I hated. I once told a colleague, "I'll slow down once we hit 8 figures." He laughed. "That's what you said at 6. The cracks weren't sudden. They were steady, like water slowly eroding stone. I didn't hear them until it was silent, until Chloe stopped asking when I'd be home, until Elaine stopped waiting up, until my home stopped feeling like mine. But the most dangerous lies are the ones you believe for too long. And I believed, with absolute conviction, that there was still time to fix it all later. Later never came. I used to think silence in a home meant peace, that a quiet kitchen, a calm living room, and the absence of arguing were signs I'd done something right. It took me far too long to realize silence was just the sound of people giving up on being heard. Elaine never shouted. She didn't throw things. She didn't storm out. She simply faded, smiling less, asking fewer questions, making plans without checking my schedule. At first, I appreciated it. She understands, I told myself. She's low maintenance, independent. The truth? She was growing a life that no longer included me. I'd come home from late-night meetings and find the living room dark, Chloe already asleep, Elaine curled up with a book, headphones in. She didn't pause her audiobook when I walked in. She'd just nod and say, "Hey, dinner's in the fridge." Some nights I didn't even eat. I'd go to bed hungry, but not for food. I later found out she had started a vlog, anonymous at first, just her voice, a gentle cadence over softly edited clips of parenting, cooking, handling school drop-offs. The title of the series? Half Married, I had no idea. Chloe's world was shifting too. She stopped asking for bedtime stories, stopped showing me her school drawings. One morning she said, "Coach Daniels is so cool. He high-fived me and told me I was strong like a superhero." I smiled. "That's great, sweetheart." "He's kind of like a dad," she said absently, pouring cereal. The spoon in my hand froze mid-air. I wanted to correct her, but what was there to say? I hadn't been to her games in over a year. I hadn't met her teachers. I didn't even know what time her school started. Then came the warning. Jake, a college friend, called one Sunday. "You okay, man?" "Yeah. Why?" "I was at that community fundraiser last week. Elaine was there. I introduced her to someone as your wife. She laughed and said, 'Oh, we're more like roommates.'" I laughed too, brushed it off. "She's got a dry sense of humor." Jake didn't laugh. "Tom, She didn't say it like a joke. That was the first crack I couldn't ignore. I opened our calendar app, something we used to sync schedules. It hadn't been updated in 3 months. I checked our family group chat. The last message from Elaine was a picture of Chloe's drawing, 2 months ago. I told myself to be present more. That weekend, Chloe invited me to her school's Father's Day breakfast. It was a simple thing, just muffins and juice, a short student performance. I had a client in town, $1 million portfolio. I told Chloe, "Next time, sweetie, we'll do something special, just you and me." She nodded, but her eyes didn't move. She just stared at the kitchen floor and said, "Okay." Elaine didn't say anything, didn't argue. That's when I should have panicked. But I didn't. Not until 2 nights later, when I couldn't sleep and went down to the kitchen for tea. I opened YouTube on my phone out of habit, and a thumbnail caught my eye. A soft-lit image of Elaine pouring coffee. Title: "The Day I Realized My Husband Was a Stranger." My blood turned to ice. I clicked. It wasn't angry or dramatic. Just her voice, calm and reflective, as she talked about what it felt like to share a bed with someone who hadn't looked her in the eyes in weeks. About cooking for a man who thanked his secretary more often than his wife. About raising a child who thought a teacher was more present than her father. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. I knew that voice. I knew that pain. The video had over 300,000 views. Comments poured in. "You're so strong. This story's mine too. Thank you for saying what we all feel." And suddenly, I wasn't a husband. I was a case study, a cautionary tale. My first instinct was rage. How could she make this public? How dare she expose our life? Then shame, because she hadn't. She hadn't exposed our life. She'd exposed hers, the version I wasn't even part of anymore. I stood in the kitchen for hours that night, the tea long gone cold in my hand, watching, rewatching, listening to a version of Elaine I hadn't heard in years, one who was scared, exhausted, resigned. The most brutal part? She never sounded angry, only lonely. And that loneliness, it was louder than any screaming ever could have been. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, the hum of networking, and the sharp clink of champagne flutes. I stood beside my boss, surrounded by men in $1,000 suits who measured success by how often they missed dinner. That night, I wasn't a husband. I was a rising star. "Wife threatened divorce last year," my boss chuckled, raising his glass. "Said I worked too much?" I told her, "Fine, you handle the mortgage then." She signed the damn papers the next day. I laughed. Loud. Too loud. It wasn't the joke. It was the relief of being among men who understood. Men who, like me, told themselves that ambition was a kind of love. I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. I didn't see Elaine until she passed by, her eyes dry, expression unreadable. She didn't stop, didn't speak. Just turned and walked out the back entrance, her heels echoing across the marble. It took my brain a full minute to register the sound. Another 30 seconds to realize she wasn't supposed to be there. I excused myself from the group, dialing her number. Straight to voicemail. I drove home faster than I should have, heart thudding for reasons I couldn't name. The driveway was empty. The lights inside the house were off. Inside, there was no music playing from Chloe's room, no gentle hum of the dishwasher. Just silence and absence. On the kitchen island sat a single piece of paper, 12 lines, typed. "Tom, you chose them every time. The late meetings, the urgent trips, the clients who needed you more than we did. I waited, I warned, I adjusted, I broke. This isn't revenge, it's survival." Chloe and I are staying with my mother. Don't come looking. Not tonight. You've made your choice. So I'm making mine. Elaine. I stood there for a long time, tuxedo still on, bow tie half loosened. The paper trembled in my hand, but not from the wind, from me. I walked to Chloe's room. Her bed was made. Her favorite stuffed dinosaur was gone. A small envelope lay on the pillow. It was pink, decorated with flower stickers. Inside, a folded sheet of lined notebook paper, written in her uneven 8-year-old handwriting. Dear Daddy, I went with Mommy, because she came to my play and you didn't. I miss you, but you miss a lot too. Love, Chloe. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the house, of my lungs, of the world. I called Elaine, no answer, called again, straight to voicemail. Chloe's iPad had a parental lock. I couldn't even message her. I paced the kitchen, tried texting, tried emailing, nothing. I stared at the fridge, once covered in family photos, now bare. I opened the drawers. Half the silverware was gone. The closet, her side empty, my suits still hanging untouched. My world was still here, but my people were not. I sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinets, and cried like I hadn't since I was 12. At some point, I stood up, walked to the bookshelf in our living room, pulled down the wedding album, the one Elaine insisted we print on real photo paper. I flipped through it slowly, our vows in black and white. Her eyes, tearful, trusting. My face, young, determined. On the final page, there was a handwritten note in the corner. She'd written it for me. I never noticed before. I believe in your heart more than your hustle. My hand shook as I reached for the lighter in the drawer. I held the flame under the corner of the album. It caught. Just a little. But I couldn't do it. I snuffed it out, slammed the cover shut, and placed it back on the shelf. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room, sat on Chloe's empty bed, stared at my own reflection in the dark windows. Not a husband, not a father, not even a man. Just a void in a house too big and too quiet. And somewhere, in that silence, a fire began to burn. Not of rage, but of something I hadn't felt in years. Desperation. The morning after Elaine left, I walked into the office like a ghost in a tailored suit. People nodded, congratulated me on the gala speech. You killed it last night, one of the junior partners said. I smiled, tight-lipped, and kept walking. Inside my office, the skyline of Chicago sprawled beyond the glass. My name was etched in gold on the door. Vice President, Strategic Development. I sat down and drafted a letter of resignation. Not a sabbatical, not a step back, a clean break. I sent it to HR before I could talk myself out of it. 10 minutes later, my boss stormed in. You're quitting? He said, voice somewhere between outrage and confusion. You've got options, Tom. Don't be rash. I can't do this anymore, I said. You're at the top. You think you'll just walk away and find meaning selling candles at a farmer's market? Maybe not, I said, but I'll at least know where my daughter goes to school. He paused, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. We're opening Singapore next quarter. It's a mess, but it's yours if you want it. 3 years, double your current comp. I'll throw in equity. Your family will understand once it's done. I stared at him. The offer should have thrilled me, should have made my blood pump. Instead, I said, that's the problem. I don't want my family to understand. I want them to know I'm here. He shook his head. You'll regret this. I already do, I said. I cleared out my office that afternoon. By evening, I was in a 1-bedroom rental 2 blocks from Chloe's school. No city view, no valet. just the hum of streetlights and the muffled laughter of kids playing outside. I slept on a futon that reminded me of my 20s, of beginnings. Every morning I stood by the school gate. I didn't approach, just waited. Sometimes I caught a glimpse of Chloe's backpack. Once she looked up and saw me. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Small mercies. I started cooking for one. Reading, walking, listening to old voicemails from Elaine, just to remember her voice before it grew distant. 2 weeks in, I sent her an email. I'm not asking to come back. I'm just asking for a chance to show up. No reply. Then, late one night, while scrolling through YouTube, I saw a new video on her channel. Title, The Quiet Kind of Hurt. It began with her face, not hidden behind narration. Just her, tired, makeup smudged, eyes unreadable. There was a time I hated him, she said softly. Hated the way he'd walk in like nothing was wrong. Hated how easily he apologized with gifts instead of time. She paused. But now? I don't feel anything, and that's worse. Because hate means there's still fire. Still a piece of you hoping to be proven wrong. I sat frozen. That's the danger, she continued, when you don't even want them to show up anymore. I closed the laptop. That night I didn't cry. I cleaned. I folded every piece of laundry, scrubbed the counter, rearranged the bookshelf by genre. I did everything but fall apart. Because I couldn't afford to. The next morning, I bought flowers. Not roses, just daisies. Elaine's favorite, back when we couldn't afford anything else. I left them on her porch with a note. No expectations, just memories, and maybe a new one. No reply. But the flowers were gone the next day. I started volunteering at Chloe's school library, shelving books, fixing jammed printers, helping kids find dinosaur encyclopedias. The principal didn't know who I was, just a guy with time and a polite smile. 3 Fridays later, I was shelving a row of chapter books when I heard her voice. Chloe. She was asking another kid if they'd seen her pink pencil case. I stepped out gently. It's in the blue bin by the door, I said, pointing. She looked at me, and for the first time, she nodded. Thanks. Just that. One word. But it cracked something open. That night, I sent Elaine one more message. I'm not trying to win you back. I'm trying to become someone worth choosing, even if you never do. Still no answer. But this time, I didn't need one. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing success. I was building something else, something quieter, something real. Every Sunday, I cooked dinner. At first, it was just habit. A roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. Elaine's favorite, though she hadn't tasted mine in years. I'd light candles, set the table for 3, then sit down alone and eat one quiet plate before boxing the rest for leftovers. I told myself it was for when they came back, but maybe it was just for me, to remember what family felt like, even in its ghost form. One Sunday in late October, I left a small box on Chloe's doorstep. Inside was a bracelet, handmade from twine and tiny wooden beads. Each bead was carved with a letter. One said C, the other said T. There was no note, just the bracelet. I didn't expect a response. But 3 days later, I saw her at school, walking toward the gym. She was wearing it. The beads hung loosely on her wrist, swinging as she walked. She didn't look at me, but she hadn't taken it off either. Small mercies. The next week, her teacher asked me to help with a class project, building dioramas of prehistoric habitats. I ended up at the same table as Chloe, She didn't speak for most of the hour, but as I helped cut out tiny palm trees for a dinosaur swamp, she handed me a glue stick without being asked. "Your triceratops looks weird," she said, not unkindly. "Yours is better," I replied. She smirked, then went back to cutting. That was it. No hug, no grand reconciliation, just mutual paper-cut silence. And it was everything. A week later, Elaine called. Just that, called. She asked if I was available to pick Chloe up from school on Friday. She had a work seminar, and her mother had a doctor's appointment. Her voice was even, neutral, all business. "Of course," I said, trying not to sound too eager. I arrived 30 minutes early, watched every parent filter in, watched Chloe scan the crowd. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked over. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said back. We drove in silence for most of the ride. Then, as we turned onto her street, she asked, "Do you still make pancakes?" "Every Sunday," I said. She looked out the window, then back at me. "Yours were always fluffier than Mom's." Another small mercy. The next morning, I got an email from Elaine. Subject, FYI. Body, Chloe wants to come Sunday morning. Pancakes, just pancakes. Don't ask for more. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before replying with a single line. Pancakes it is. That Sunday, I made everything from scratch. Chloe sat at the table, swinging her legs, scrolling through her tablet. When I placed the plate in front of her, she said, "They smell right." We ate mostly in silence, but when she left, she hugged me. Quick, awkward, but real. That night, I pulled an old notebook from my drawer and started writing. Not a journal, not a memoir, a message, a letter, a confession. It became a book over the next 3 months. Father Before Finance? It wasn't a bestseller. It didn't get a publishing deal right away. But I didn't write it for sales. I wrote it for her. For Elaine, for Chloe. For every man who thought climbing the ladder meant being a good father, when really it just meant being further from the ones who mattered. I printed one advance copy, sent it to Elaine. No message, just the book. She didn't respond. But 2 weeks later, I saw her in the school parking lot. She walked past me without saying a word, then stopped, turned back. "I read it," she said. I waited. She didn't finish the sentence, just nodded, eyes glossy, then turned and walked away. But that nod felt louder than any applause. The week before Christmas, I invited them both for dinner. No pressure, no expectations. Elaine declined. Chloe said she'd come for dessert. I made lasagna, lit candles, set the table again. 3 plates. She arrived at 7:45, said she could stay for 20 minutes. She stayed for an hour. We played board games. She laughed, really laughed, when I knocked over the whole Scrabble tray. "Still clumsy," she said, mouth full of cookies. Elaine picked her up. She didn't come inside, but she waved from the car. Progress. By February, Sundays became pancake mornings again. Sometimes Chloe brought her sketchbook. Sometimes she asked me to read to her. Sometimes we just sat and said nothing. But the space between us was no longer empty. It was healing. Then, one evening in March, Elaine called. "Chloe wants to invite you to her science fair next week," she said. "I'd love to," I said. Silence. Then she added, "I do too." It wasn't a declaration, but it was an opening. The night of the fair, Chloe's volcano model won second place. She asked if I could take a photo of her with both of us, Elaine on one side, me on the other. We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, not touching, not smiling too wide, but the photo felt like a beginning. That Sunday, I cooked dinner. Elaine came. For the first time in over a year, we all sat at the same table. 3 plates. One conversation. No ghosts. Just the quiet sound of something broken slowly coming back together. 2 years later, I stood on a stage at a leadership conference, not as a corporate VP, but as a man who nearly lost everything chasing titles no one remembered. The screen behind me didn't list my job history. It said, father, listener, builder of second chances. I now worked as a mentor and advisor for high-level executives struggling to balance family and ambition. Not a coach. Just a cautionary tale with a pulse. They didn't need my strategies. They needed my scars. After every talk, someone pulled me aside. A CEO, a founder, a father who hadn't made it to a single parent-teacher conference that year. They'd ask, "Is it too late?" And I'd always answer the same way. "Not if you're asking." One evening after a session, Chloe handed me a sealed envelope. "Don't open it here," she said. "Just wait until you're alone." Inside was her college essay. She'd just submitted her applications. The title read, "From Stranger to Father." My throat tightened. "I used to think my dad was a guest star in my life," she wrote. "He'd show up in pictures, but not in memories. I loved him because I was supposed to, but I didn't know him. Not really. But something changed. He did. Slowly, reluctantly, but with everything he had left. And now, he's the man I want to become, even if I'm not a man." I sat in my car after reading it, letting the words settle, letting them stitch up something inside me that I didn't know was still open. Elaine had changed too. She now led workshops for women in demanding careers. Talks titled things like "Self Before Support" and "Loving Without Losing Yourself." At one session I quietly attended, I heard her say, "I used to think loyalty meant staying. Now I know it means not abandoning yourself either." When the workshop ended, I waited outside. We didn't speak much, just walked a few blocks together in silence. The air between us no longer tense, just lived in. Eventually, she said, "I never thought I'd be proud of your story." "I never thought I'd have one worth telling," I said. We didn't remarry, not yet. We didn't need to. We traveled with Chloe, 3 of us. Not as a perfect family, but as a team who'd learned to respect the cracks and still keep walking. On a trip to Colorado, Chloe and I went hiking while Elaine stayed back to read. Halfway up the trail, she turned to me. "You know I sent you Mom's vlog, right?" I blinked. "What?" "That first one. The one that went viral. I emailed it to your work account from a friend's computer. You never knew because I used a fake name." I stopped walking. "Why?" I asked. She shrugged. I wanted to see if you'd care. If you saw it, what you'd do." "And did I pass?" I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. She looked at me, grinning. "You're here, aren't you?" It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was something better. Evidence, proof that love could survive, even if it had to take the long way around. Later that year, I was invited to speak at Chloe's high school graduation. Not as a keynote, just a parent speaker. I kept it short. "I chased the wrong things for too long," I told the auditorium. But I learned something the hard way. Success doesn't mean much if you're alone at the dinner table. I looked out and saw Elaine and Chloe, both smiling. Afterward, a father I didn't know came up and shook my hand. He didn't say anything, just nodded. But his eyes said enough. That was the legacy I'd hoped for. Not a plaque, not a promotion, just one father showing up for his kid, and maybe, just maybe, helping another do the same.